We'll look at the short word answers. Area number 1 to do with the nature and process of social research. What is the primary purpose of social research? This is from section A, where you have multiple choice questions. So I've just summarized your previous exams. So the purpose of social research is to explore, to describe, to explain, and predict social phenomena. So we have social research, which seeks to understand the human behavior and societal patterns. Which research approach allows theory to emerge from data? So it's an inductive approach. So the inductive reasoning develops theories based on observations and patterns found in the data. Predominantly, it is from the qualitative research through explorations, and researchers will go deeper to get understandings on how societies function. Question number 3. Why is literature review important in research? So literature review is important in research for many reasons. Number 1, it helps to identify gaps. Literature review helps to avoid duplication. It provides you with theoretical grounding. So literature review will serve for a lot of critical foundations in research. It involves you reviewing existing data and theories and findings relevant research topic. So the process will help you identify what has already been done. So this review will help you highlight the gaps that are there. What types of gaps do we know in research? Types of gaps that we should understand in our research. We talked about the 5 types of gaps.
Empirical gaps.
Empirical
There's
gaps.
Theoretical gaps, methodological gaps, and contextual gaps.
Oh, great. So we talked about a number of gaps. Yeah, that is true. Empirical gaps, theoretical gaps. Okay. We also have systematic gaps. All right. Methodological gaps. Okay. Gaps from the conceptual studies. So those are the types of gaps that we should know. So you should also understand what theoretical gaps are. These lie in outdated or incomplete theoretical frameworks. So theoretical gaps will come in when you want to bring in a new theory. You want to defy an existing theory. We have what we call a theoretical gap. What is a methodological gap? What is a methodological gap? Empirical gap exists when there's lack of real world data in real evidence. So this gap arises in studies that need to be conducted. We have a lot of empirical gap when it comes to Zambia. Theoretical gap comes about when there's a lack of what? Adequate theories to explain the phenomenon. Systematic gap comes about when there's what? A gap of comprehensive or well-conducted systematic reviews. We have also case study gap, which comes from the lack of detail or in-depth explanation on specific examples. We have a methodological gap, which has limitations or weaknesses in the research methods that were used. So you can suggest something else. So these are the gaps that we talk about. All right.
What about contextual gaps? Sorry, contextual gaps.
Okay, you mentioned
Is that where the geographical locations, like not all the geographical aspect was covered? Is that where it comes in? I'm a bit confused with that one.
Geographic, yeah, is under contextual gap. So the contextual gap basically refers to where literature, where existing studies do not adequately address a specific context in setting. So this gap actually highlights that there's need for research that considers particular conditions, environments. So under contextual gap, we have the geographic context where research may be abundant in one region and lacking in others. There's also cultural or demographic context, which looks at studies that focus just on one cultural aspect, okay? We also look at sector, industry, specific context, where it's just looking at certain sectors. All these are under contextual gap. Time period as well, it looks or focuses on a certain period of time. All these are under contextual gaps, right? We're together? Then what type of theory involves testing a clearly stated hypothesis? It is what? A deductive what? Theory. So deductive theory is applied to a quantitative research where you're going to test the hypothesis using the inferential analysis. So we have inductive and deductive. What's the difference between inductive and deductive now that I've mentioned both? What is the difference between inductive and deductive? So inductive, the difference is in terms of the nature. Inductive works on specific observations or evidence to a broader generalization. So it starts with instances where you observe, identify patterns, then you form a general conclusion. So under inductive, um, the conclusions in inductive are more probable, they're guaranteed. Okay, even if premises are true, the conclusion might still be false. For instance, if you are making an observation to say all swans I have seen are white, somebody will say swans at the zoo are white. The conclusion will say all swans are white. So this is a kind of inductive reasoning. When we're dealing with deductive reasoning, it works from a general theory or premise to reach to a specific conclusion. So it comes from general to particular cases. So deductive starts with a broad theory and breaks them down to logical steps. So conclusions in deductive reasoning are more certain and sure. For instance, you can start with one premise, say, all humans are mortal. Okay, then you can say, Collins is a human, therefore Collins is mortal. All right. So deductive reasoning is common in quantitative research. Are we together?
Sorry, I lost concentration there. Could you just maybe go back a bit?
Just a key difference is I'll be meandering so that you understand questions in case I'm manipulated in one way. So I'm saying the difference between inductive and deductive reasoning can be explained in terms of the starting point. So inductive reasoning starts from the specific to general, whereas deductive starts from general to specific. Okay? So this one is mainly used in what? Quantitative research, deductive, DQ. So inductive is for qualitative research studies like case studies. So the conclusion is more probable but not certain, whereas deductive, the premise is usually true. So these are the main differences that you need to understand. All right, we go to question number 5. What are the main stages in the research process? The main stages in the research process. So research has its own stages that you need to understand. So research starts with problem identification, literature review, hypothesis formulation, data collection, and conclusion. So in problem identification, that's the first step into identify the problem. It requires you to investigate. Then literature review, you need to review existing theories to understand the current state. Hypothesis formulation, it will be based on the problem in the literature. So you need to formulate a hypothesis or research questions. Then you now conduct your data collection, which includes surveys, interviews, then analyze the data to identify any patterns or relationships. Then you make a conclusion from and recommendations from what you have achieved. Are we together? So we're done with chapter 1. We're just summarizing chapters and the key things. Okay, so we'll go to theme number 2. Well, we're going to look at the literature review basically and the research design. Okay, what is a research design? And what types of research design do we know? So a research design is simply a structured framework for conducting research. It's a blueprint. It's a detailed plan. It outlines your methods, your data types, your procedures to be used, and it ensures that you're systematic, they are valid, and they're reliable. Okay, so we have research designs under qualitative and under quantitative. So what research designs under qualitative? Case study, phenomenological, okay. Under quantitative, what research designs do we know? Descriptive.
Under what?
Under quantitative.
So there is descriptive,
Mhm.
correlational,
Mhm.
quasi-experimental. I
And
said, wait, I said descriptive, correlational,
mhm.
quasi-experiment, and experimental,
Yes.
causal, or something like that.
Yeah. Now let's talk about experimental. What is the main aim of experimental research design?
So I think that one is for, I
To establish causality, cause and effect. So the goal is to determine how one variable or more variables, which we call independent, will cause changes in another variable, which is a dependent variable. So experiment research, the researcher wants to manipulate the independent to observe the effects on the dependent. Okay, let's define what is a cross-sectional research design. What is a cross-sectional research design? So cross-sectional research is used when we want to um, collect data at a point in time. It involves you gathering data from participants at a specific moment. It is one research that compares different groups of variables at the same time, mainly to identify the patterns or relationships. So here data is collected at once. It gives you a snapshot of the population, making meaningful associations, but not establishing cause and effect. So it is just used to conduct a survey, observation. We have what we call longitudinal research design. What is a longitudinal research design? It's a research that follows subjects over time. It tracks changes and developments over a period of time. So longitudinal is another research that you need to know of. It involves you gathering data from the same objects at multiple points. So longitudinal is a time interval. So it is used to track how variables will change over time. So longitudinal studies are many for evaluating and understanding of the effects with time. For instance, it will help you see how one's behavior changes with time when they're young to when they are old. We also have what we call quasi-experimental research. What is the difference? Quasi-experimental. So this question is usually coming. How does it differ from experimental research? So somebody confidently tell me the difference between quasi-experimental and experimental. I've been singing about this. Okay, so we'll skip that. We'll go to chapter 3 on sampling techniques. So we are going chapter by chapter, just to summarize what we've been learning throughout. So we're basically looking at chapter 3 of our research. So what is sampling? What are sampling designs? What is sampling error? So in dealing with sampling, it's simply a subset of the entire population. So it's a process of selecting a smaller group from a larger population, which we call a census. So it involves you using a manageable number of participants. There are many reasons why we sample: to save time, resources, and effort. But we are going to use that sample to generalize what? About the broader population parameters. So a sample must be representative. Researchers must make valid conclusions. The two types of sampling are under probability. We have simple random and stratified. So probability sampling methods are methods that have to do with numbers. Every member has an equal chance of being selected. So there's a non-zero chance of being selected. So there's simple random sampling where every individual has an equal chance. Stratified, where you're going to divide the population into subgroups that we call strata. Okay, so how does stratified sampling work? We divide them into strata. Define sampling error. What is sampling error? So sampling error is the difference between, or somebody wants to try to expand what is sampling error? It's a discrepancy between the parameter of the sample and the parameter of the entire population. For instance, the weight of a sample, 10 out of the entire class of 50. If you get the weight of those 10 only, you get 5 kgs. And the entire 50 is 10 kgs. So the difference between the actual and the sample is what we call sampling error. The difference between the sample statistic and the population parameter.
What about the sampling bias? Sorry, I keep getting them confused.
Okay, sampling bias. What is sampling bias? What is sampling bias? I've been singing about this. I need your interaction. You're too quiet. So in dealing with sampling bias, we are looking at what? When a sample selected does not represent the population from which it's drawn, hence leading to inaccurate results. So that is called the sampling bias. So the actual, when a sample that you selected is not representative, that is what we call sampling bias, which can lead to what? Our results being inaccurate from the larger population. So it comes about because of different types of biases. What we call selection bias. Selection bias comes about when individual or groups have a higher or lower chance of being selected. So this can lead to them being unrepresentative. So it happens when sampling method is flawed. All right. So that is called selection bias. You are selecting using convenience sampling because you stay where near a more. This is stay near Manda here more. So you're picking only respondents from. So that's selection bias. We have non-response bias, which happens when individuals selected do not respond. Okay, which will statistically affect your results. So data may be missing, leads to inaccurate results. What other types of bias do we know? Measurement bias or instrument bias. It occurs when the data collection instrument, like a questionnaire or surveys, are faulty. So they lead to errors, we call systematic errors in the data. So this happens when the instrument is poorly designed. So it's important that you are very particular about how the instrument is designed. We also have observer bias. What is observer bias? It occurs when the researcher's expectations will influence your recording. Okay? You are convinced that gay rights should be given. So even as you're interviewing, you're asking in a way that will lead people to agree with your perspective. Recall bias. This happens when participants don't remember. They're trying to investigate, but they just can't remember. Recall bias. Okay, social desirability bias is what happens when participants respond in a way they believe is socially acceptable. Okay, so not because they're convinced, but socially acceptable. We have what we call sampling frame bias. It also comes about when the list or sampling frame from which the sample is being drawn is incomplete or inaccurate. You're getting from a list of manufacturers. You're doing a case study of SMEs in Zambia, a list of manufacturing SMEs, but the list is not complete. It doesn't cater all the manufacturers. Quick, can you remember? Mention any 4 types of biases that I've mentioned. Any 4 types of bias?
I think you've talked about the selection bias,
Mm-hmm.
non-response bias,
Mm-hmm.
the measurement, and that's instrument bias, and observer bias.
And what's the difference between sampling error and sampling bias?
I think the other one, the sampling one, is to do with incomplete and or inaccurate data collected. I'm not sure about the other one.
One looks at the way the data is collected, and one looks at the actual data collected. All right.
By the way, which year are we discussing, sir?
We just deviated.
Just joined you.
We're looking at sampling error. So a question will be
okay. Well, we are not looking at any. Okay.
We'll be meandering, so we're going step by step. So feel free to ask questions that are related because I've just summarized these key areas so that we can learn as we are revising. Is that okay?
Hope you share this. You share this as well.
Yes. All right. So let's go to our next section to do with data collection. So mention any 3 types of data collection methods: questionnaires, interviews, and observations. So what is common about them? These are primary data sources. All right. So questionnaires, when you're collecting questionnaires, they're into 2 types. They are what we call structured and non-structured or semi-structured questionnaires. The structured have what? Closed-ended responses. So questionnaires are a set of questions that are used to collect standardized responses. Interviews are direct personal communications that we have between the researcher and the participant. They will give you more in-depth. Observations, they give you an ability to watch or record behaviors. We have 2 types of observation. We have participant and non-participant. Participants, you are embedded in the actual research, you act. What are closed-ended questionnaires? These are surveys with predefined answers. Why do we have closed-ended questionnaires? Closed-ended questionnaires will allow you to quickly collect responses. They have many advantages. They're quick. Okay, they'll give you yes or no responses. They allow for uniform collection of data and it's easier to analyze. Okay, the advantages of we also have open-ended questionnaires. These give you an open end to give responses and rich in data. They allow respondents to use their own words, not you giving them closed thoughts. This method is rich and is more particularly important when you're dealing with qualitative. How do we analyze these? We use thematic analysis. Software is called NVivo. So define participant observation. This is observing behaviors and being part of a group. So here the researcher will actively engage in the group while studying and also observing the behaviors. So it's a deeper way of collecting data. You get first-hand because of what? Your experience. Participant. Our Lord came to experience our abilities to conquer sin, so that we should not say that it's easy because you're in heaven, you have not experienced. So he used what? Participant observation. Why is pilot testing important? Pilot testing is actually a trial of data collection before you actually do a full-scale study. It's important because it helps us clarify our instruments, enhance reliability and validity. It's important. If there are any issues in wedding, they can correct you. So if you conduct a pilot study, it will help reduce the risk of errors. So you also need to understand in my videos, you should check through some questions, especially Dr. Lumbo will ask you to do a step-by-step method on how questionnaires are conducted. Google Meet focus groups are conducted. Open-ended questionnaires, participant and non-participant. I'll not talk about them here because they're already done in my previous classes. Okay. Any questions on data collection that I've left out? Additions when we come to data collection? Okay, so we have primary and secondary data collection method. Can you tell me examples of secondary data collection methods and what secondary data is? What is secondary data?
The secondary
I
data, I
think
think
this
it
is
is.
Mhm.
Correct.
You can answer?
I think this is data that is already been provided by other people. It's not new. It's already in existence. You find it maybe in government records, the central statistical offices, government gazettes, and you find it maybe in NGOs. The research that has been done, let's say, the effect of antiretroviral treatment on things like that. I don't know if that's
Very correct. Additionally, it is meant for another use, all right? So you're just using it for your study. What are the disadvantages of using that secondary data? It is not for that particular
sometimes
study.
it could be outdated. If
Could
you
be
are using
outdated.
it, it could be outdated. There is new studies that have come up
Uh-huh.
which disqualify that. So you could be working on outdated data.
Exactly. On top of that, it would have wrong methods that may be erroneous and you can adopt the wrong findings for your research. All right. Somebody has asked, what is triangulation? Very good question. It's also scams. It's a method or strategy where we're going to use multiple methods of data sources, multiple methods of theories, multiple methods of researchers to cross-check or validate our findings. Those who are preachers here, we triangulate when you're giving points. You get verses from here to here just to validate a point on how scripture speaks one language. So the purpose of triangulation is to increase what? Credibility, is to increase validity, is to increase reliability. And this is what we'll be looking at in our next chapter of your findings to confirm what different people have done based on different perspectives. So there are different types of triangulation. There's methodological triangulation, where you use more than one method. You can use surveys, questionnaires, observations for the same phenomenon. There's data triangulation, where you're going to collect data from different sources using multiple populations or data sets. There's investigator triangulation, where you're going to use multiple researchers to analyze what they did. All right. There's also theoretical triangulation. What is theoretical triangulation? Where you're going to do what? Use different theories or frameworks to interpret the same data. Why is triangulation important? To enhance validity, to reduce bias, to have a comprehensive understanding and deeper what? Understanding of things to improve your validity. Are we together? Are we following? I'm loving questions because they are helpful and insightful. They're giving us stamina to. Yeah. Okay. Can we proceed to the next? Any questions surrounding the thematic area? So I'm dealing with themes now. Okay, so if that is clear.
Let me take you back.
Uh-huh.
Data collection method
Uh-huh.
for thematic, is it falling under this data collection method?
That's data analysis, thematic analysis, not a collection method.
Okay.
Type of
Yes,
analysis.
I just need to explain to me what it is because I've been failing to understand it very well. There's that other one which is it okay, that's one I've gotten the grasp of. It's a theoretical literature, is it literary review? Theoretical.
Mm-hmm.
There's theoretical and there's the conceptual.
Mm-hmm.
So those are gotten the hang of it. Now this thematic, I need to really understand what it is in simple things.
What is thematic analysis? That's your question, right?
Yes,
So,
what is it and when can I use it?
so thematic analysis is only used when you're dealing with qualitative research. So you are actually analyzing based on themes and patterns. So when you're dealing with interviews, you're writing. So you cannot write what everyone has done or said. You group them. Okay, these ones are talking about. So when you're dealing with family life, okay, what issues do you have in your marital issues? No, my husband doesn't give me money. No, he's stingy. You just put them under one theme on finance. You also do a thematic analysis on to do with what? Infidelity. So you are going to bring infidelity. All these different ways of talking about, they're just putting. So thematic analysis, you're organizing the data in a way that is detailed, insightful, but easy. So thematic analysis just gives you what? Themes or ideas that emerge from the data. It makes you familiarize yourself with data so that the data when you're reading, okay, the material is based on this. It's also easy for coding and categorizing data. So it's done in software. So you cannot write what everyone has done. So you just use one way to say, okay, financial issues, okay. And also it's used to I get you, I hope you get what I'm saying now. Is that clear? Annie?
I'm trying to still wrap my head around it. I don't know why I can't get it. I don't know why.
So thematic analysis, like I said, it's when you're dealing with qualitative data, you're collecting what people say. This one said this about what do you feel about how the economy is. Okay, you cannot. That's why qualitative. You cannot use more than 30 people. So within those 30 people, there should be at least 4 or 5 that have the same theme recurring. So thematic analysis is used to group ideas in words that are resounding, that are significant to a research question. Okay.
Okay, so that means I have to look at for similarities in the responses people are giving.
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
So now it brings
So
me
it's,
to the question. Uh-huh.
it's more like a theme.
Yes, more like a theme.
If I was to bring it to a layman's world, like
Mhm.
when we are planning for weddings, we usually ask, so, okay, what's the theme of the wedding?
Uh-huh.
Okay, All right, thanks.
I'll remember that in the exam.
Yeah, please
Hello?
remember that. Yeah, so something in connection. So it brings me to a question that when you're doing qualitative analytical techniques, these are non-numeric. There are 5 key non-numeric analysis that are in qualitative. Mention them. One of them is thematic analysis, where you're going to identify patterns or themes within which questions were answered. What other kind of analysis is used under qualitative? We talked about them.
Descriptive?
What?
Is descriptive one of them?
No. Content analysis, ground theory analysis, narrative analysis, remember, phenomenological analysis. So these are the types of qualitative. They range from that. We are dealing with descriptive is under quantitative. Yes, it's under quantitative. All right.
May you come again, sir? Come again, sir? That one? On the
Okay,
5 type.
so I'm saying when you're analyzing data, how do we analyze qualitative data? We use thematic analysis, we use content analysis, we use case study analysis, we use phenomenological analysis, discourse analysis. These are types of analysis that we use under qualitative. Under quantitative, we have descriptive, inferential analysis, we have regression analysis, correlation analysis, ANOVA, chi-square, factor analysis. All these fall under quantitative. All right? The structural equation modeling that we looked at in that conceptual framework, multivariant analysis, all these time series, they fall under quantitative. So you need to know what type of analysis falls under which. All right, so we have exhausted our time for this session. We'll start another session right about